All right, everyone, welcome back to another episode of Fallen Flags America. But before we get started today, I just wanted to try a different little bit of an intro to the show, just something I'm testing out. So, welcome back to the show. Today we're doing our recap of the daily photo. Today we have Wabash 505, which was the only U23B that the Wabash purchased shortly before their merger into the Norfolk and Western system. In, I want to say, around 1966, although don't quote me on that because that's around the time the Wabash was bought out by the Norfolk and Western, which then made them part of the Norfolk Southern when it came in 1983. Well, originally as a paper organization and emerged as a railroad 2 years later. But regardless, the Wabash counts as a fallen flag, so I thought that would be a good starting topic for our story today. We also got two more pictures of the Wabash. This was taken in North Kansas City, Missouri, in January 31st, January 30th of 1965, by Chuck Zeller. So shout out to Chuck Zeller for this photo. Next up, we have another Chuck Zeller photo. We have one of the three Wabash Fairbanks H2466 train masters that was purchased by the railroad, with 591 being a former demo model, TM2. It was one of four of the demonstrators built by Fairbanks Morse and operated the system until it was sold to the Wabash, which then it was sold to the Norfolk and Western and presumably scrapped sometime in the 70s. This was taken in North Kansas City as well. This third picture is of Wabash 691, an F7A model. It was taken on the I don't remember what the date was when this was taken, but this was taken by Jeffrey Lawrence, so shout out to it was taken on 8/29, 1963. So the Wabash still had its identity in the 1965-ish and kind of lost it by 1970. So I just wanted to show you this photo since it came up. This is WIRX number 1030 and X Seaboard System GP30. This is, at the time of this photo, for some reason, this was stationed at Burnside, Kentucky. So I don't know why that is. But anyway, let's get to the show. So here we have the article from AmericanRails.com. That's www.american-rails.com. No caps. And I will leave a link to this article in the description if you want to check it out for yourselves. The Wabash Railroad, with their slogan, "Follow the Flag." While it was the only Midwestern bridge line, the Wabash carried a fascinating heritage. It earned pop culture status thanks to the famous song, "The Wabash Cannonball," which eventually led to a name of the same train and a legendary logo with the slogan, "Follow the Flag." Its corporate history was a roller coaster affair of prosperity and struggle. During its formative years of the company did relatively well until Jay Gill gained control in the late 1870s. His ruthless speculator, I think, tried to incorporate it into his planned transcontinental system scheme, failed when overextended financing led to bankruptcy. Gould retained ownership, and his son inherited the empire in 1896. When George ran into monetary trouble, just a decade later, the family's involvement forever ended. The Wabash prospered after this time thanks to its many key corridors, which handled a diverse traffic base. Its modern network was slightly over 2,000 route miles, reaching Detroit, Michigan, Chicago, Illinois, St. Louis, Missouri, Kansas City, Missouri, Omaha, Nebraska, and even Buffalo, New York, thanks to a trackage rights agreement. The mighty Pennsylvania Railroad acquired stock ownership during the Depression era, whereupon the Wabash remained a subsidiary until the Norfolk and Western's takeover in 1964. Today, many of its principal routes remain in use. So we have a picture here. This is a Wabash E8A number 1012 arrives at Tolano, Illinois with train number 4 of the eastbound Cannonball as it eases across the Illinois Central Diamonds. This was taken on October 28, 1962 by Roger Puta. Their stories may have been very different, but the Wabash and New York, Chicago, and St. Louis, the Nickel Plate Road, were quite similar. They were roughly the same size, served many of the same markets, and prospered during the 20th century. In addition, both wound up as components of a greatly expanded Norfolk and Western Railway during the mid 1960s. For the Wabash, its path to success was far rockier and uncertain. Things began in great fervor when Illinois passed the Transportation Improvement Act during 1837, which sought to interlink the state with 1,342 miles of new railroad at a cost of $10 million. One part of this endeavor was the Northern Cross Railroad, projected to connect the Quincy and Indiana state line at Danville via Spring and Decatur. The entire scheme was a dismal failure, although it did manage to complete 56 miles between Medorsa and Springfield by October 1841, before money ran out. According to historian Mike Schaefer's book, More Classic American Railroads, a little 26460 named Rogers was the first locomotive to operate in Illinois when it rumbled over the Intennal 8 miles between Medorsa and Morgan City in November 8, 1838. Wabash F7s and other power in Medievanville, Michigan, September 7, 1964, with Wabash 699 leading this power move. Some of the Wabash's famed trains included the Banner Blue, a Chicago to St. Louis train, the Bluebird, also the Chicago to St. Louis, the City of Kansas City, St. Louis to Kansas City, the City of St. Louis to Denver to Cheyenne to Los Angeles, the Des Moines Limited, St. Louis to Des Moines, the Detroit Arrow, Chicago to Detroit, the Detroit Limited, St. Louis to Detroit, the Kansas City Express, St. Louis to Kansas City, the Midnight Limited, St. Louis to Kansas City, Omaha Limited, St. Louis to Omaha, the Pacific Coast Special, St. Louis to Pacific Coast, the Redbird, Chicago to Detroit, the St. Louis Limited, Detroit to St. Louis, the St. Louis Limited, Des Moines, Omaha to St. Louis, the St. Louis Special, Kansas City to St. Louis, the Midnight, Chicago to St. Louis, and the Wabash Cannonball, St. Louis to Detroit. As the North Cross struggled, the state decided to lease the property in hopes of turning around its fortunes. Private interests took over in May of 1842, but unfortunately, their efforts proved futile. With no relief in sight, it was sold on April 26 in 1847 to Nicholas Ridgely, a successful Springfield speculator. Although he played a rather insequential role in the company's history, um, he is credited with providing it a solid financial footing. He substantially sold part of his interest to businessmen Tom Mather of Springfield and James Dunlap of Jacksonville, who recognized it as the Sangamon and Morgan Railroad. They spent considerable money to restore rail service and then sold their stake to New York City investors for $100,000. July 22, 1849, trains began running once more, while the western railhead was extended from Dorset to nearby Naples. On February 13, 1853, another reorganization took place, this time as the Great Western Railroad. It was under this title that considerable expansion occurred. By November of 1856. Rails have reached Danville, as well as connections with Illinois Central, then the country's largest railroad, which opened new traffic opportunities. The Wabash logo, author's work. Just as things were looking up for the financial panic of 1837 led to another reorganization as the Great Western Railroad, or the GWRR. This last entirety had only began in operation for a few years when it merged with the Toledo and Western Railroad, T&W, in June of 1856 to create the Toledo, Wabash, and Western Railway, the TW&W. The T&W was a consolidation itself that had been formed on October 8, 1858. By connecting with the Great Western at the Illinois-Indiana state line, the TW&W boosted a 522-mile network stretching from Quincy and Keokuk, Iowa, reached through GWRR's lease of the Illinois and Southern Iowa Railroad to Toledo, Ohio. Notable interment towns included Lafayette, Indiana, Purdue, Indiana, and Fort Wayne, Indiana. As author H. Roger Grant points out in his authoritative title, Follow the Flag, A History of the Wabash Railroad Company, the TW&W was an immediate success thanks to the region's rich agricultural opportunities and rapidly expanding population. It carried no outstanding debt and grossed more than $4 million by 1868. With so much cash available, it's not surprising that further growth was soon in order. In 1869, it began laying sections of steel rail in place of iron, and then acquired the Decatur and East St. Louis Railroad during August of 1870. This 109-mile carrier connected its namesake cities and provided access into the important gateway of St. Louis, Missouri. Origins of the Wabash logo and slogan, Follow the Flag. Origins of the Wabash logo date back to 1886, when the railroad began featuring a flag and banner in the red words, the Wabash Line. Displayed in gold and course with a smaller blue rectangle, it proclaimed itself the banner line of the Central States, which was later shortened to the Banner Route during the 1890s. In 1912, the company adopted the now widely recognized slogan, Follow the Flag. While the phrase was more commonly thought to straightforwardly mean use the railroad for all of one's shipping and travel needs, Mr. Grant points out it may actually have origins dating back to a 19th century predecessor, the North Missouri Railroad. According to the Wabash, an engine carrying what is known as a pay flag went over the railroad just the day ahead of a pay car for the purpose of letting all employees know the pay car would come the next day. From the fact that the pay follow the flag came from coining the remark, follow the flag. Whatever it may have been, the cause it was simple but brilliant marketing tactic, which certainly earned the Wabash arguably the most innovative logo and slogan of all time. Here we see E8 number 1008 is leading the Detroit Limited, a St. Louis to Detroit passenger train stopped here at Decatur, Illinois, in June of 1966. This was toward the end of the Wabash when they were being merged into the Norfolk and Western, as power is evident here. Another important lease was the Hannibal and Naples Railroad, which reached Hannibal, Missouri, along the west bank of the Mississippi River. From here, points further west could be assessed. Once more, just as the railroad seemed poised for greatness, bankruptcy occurred during February of 1875 as a result of 1873's financial panic. Because it was so well positioned and still guaranteeing a respectable business, reorganization was brief. It emerged on January 10, 1877 as the Wabash Railway, the first of many similar names that were carried during the next half century. What followed was a whirlwind of activity that saw J. Cloud gain control. It all began when Cornelius Commodore Kingsland Garrison acquired the St. Louis, Kansas City, and Northern STLKC&M Railroad in early 1877. This 582-mile property connected St. Louis with Kansas City, while a northern branch from Mulberry reached Omawata, Iowa. Just a year later, in November of 1878, he added the Wabash. During this brief stint, Garrison did much for both railroads. By 1879, Gould had acquired a rather substantial block of Wabash stock and convinced Garrison to sell him the rest while picking up the STLKC and N in the process. Here we see Wabash train H2466 Trainmaster No. 554 works a local in Sunedam, Illinois on November 24, 1962. This was only about four years till the Wabash was merged into Norfolk and Western. For the man's many shortcomings, Gould's efforts created much of a modern Wabash system. After establishing control of both properties, he merged them with the new 1,400-mile Wabash, St. Louis and Pacific, WSTL and P, during November of 1879. A year later, the Wabash got into Chicago when it opened a 90-mile extension north of Tron, built as the Chicago and Tron Railway. Below this point, the previous Wabash Railway had picked up a small Chicago and Paducah Railroad in 1877 that was working on a route from Streator to Effingham via Strawn, crossing its main line at Beaumont. To reach Chicago's downtown, the Chicago and Western Indiana was utilized, which provided access into Dearborn Station, a facility shared with the Santa Fe Railroad, the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad, the Chicago and Eastern St. Louis Railroad, the Erie Railroad, the Grand Trunk Railway, the Chicago, Indianapolis, and Louisville Railway, the Monon route. The first passenger train from Chicago to St. Louis was inaugurated on August 8, 1880. As the WSTL and P built eastward, it also looked to the west and the Council Bluffs Omaha Gateway, an interchange of the Transcontinental Union Pacific Railroad, was a goal for many Midwestern lines, and the WSTL and P was no different. It opened such a connection in October of 1879 through a combination of lease and new construction. This is an official map of the Wabash Railroad dating to the early 1950s. Here's some timetables from 1952. While all of this was ongoing, an extension to Detroit was also underway. The first 93-mile Eel River Railroad connecting Logansport with Butler, Indiana, was leased in 1879. Then the Detroit, Bustler, and St. Louis was incorporated to finish the remaining 114 miles into Detroit. The work finished in short order, and the new corridor formally opened on August 4, 1881. As Guild rapidly expanded Wabash, mostly by leasing smaller carriers. One particularly notable addition was the Des Moines and St. Louis Railroad, which provided access to Iowa's capital, Des Moines. It ballooned into a major 3,549 mile operation by 1884. Unfortunately, in his quest to establish a true coast to coast system, he overextended his finances. One by one, they fell into bankruptcy, including WSTL&P, on May 28, 1884. In the aftermath, nearly all of his leased holdings reverted back to their original owners, while the core network serving St. Louis, St. Louis, Chicago, Toledo, and Detroit was retained. The company emerged from receivership in May 15, 1889 as the Wabash Railroad in typical Guild fashion. The shrewd railroader managed to retain control. Here, Wabash E8A number 1000 during October of 1951. The unit was originally an E7 outshot in 1946, but returned to EMD and built to E8 specifications. Note the Atlantic coastline covered wagons in the background. In 1896, Guild's empire was handed over to his son, George, who continued his father's transcontinental ambitions. By the early 20th century, the younger tycoon had once again nearly accomplished the feat through the control of the Missouri Pacific, Western Pacific, Denver and Rio Grande Western Maryland, and the Wheeling Lake Erie Railroad, along with the Wabash. After finishing the W&LE as far as Wheeling, West Virginia, and extended it eastward into Pittsburgh as the Wabash-Pittsburgh Terminal Railway completed in 1904, all that remained was a 50-mile segment from Pittsburgh to Connellsville, later built the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Railroad. An iconic twist of fate, the younger Guild also overstretched his available capital, and the empire collapsed. The Wabash entered receivership once more on December 26, 1911. George's time at the helm did produce two noteworthy legacies: an improved Chicago corridor and access into Buffalo. The former launched in 1881 as the Montpelier and Chicago Railroad to build a direct route between Detroit, Toledo, and Chicago. This 150-mile connector split from a Detroit main line at Montpelier, Indiana, and officially opened on April 21st, 1883. In the process, long-time trackage rights over the Erie, Chicago, and Atlantic were eliminated. Reaching Buffalo involved almost no construction, as an agreement was worked out with the Grand Trunk Railway of Canada on January 24, 1898, to lease 230 miles of its system through southern Ontario. Over time, this trackage became a vital component of the Wabash network. Wabash E8 number 1003, sitting in the Illinois Central Diamond with the Wabash Cannonball, boards at Tolano, Illinois on December 28, 1962. Another Roger Puda photo. With George's financial ruin, Guild investment ended for good. The railroad was subsequently sold at foreclosure and reorganized as the Wabash Railway on October 22, 1915. It contained just over 2,000 route miles, 321 miles of secondary mileage, and 476 miles of trackage rights. Once free from the Guild's influence, the Wabash reached new heights. It achieved operating revenues of more than $4 million just prior to the start of the First World War, thanks in part to Detroit's expanding automotive industry. Some of the newfound income was used to bolster infrastructure and purchase new locomotives. Then the United States Railroad Administration took over the national industry, made effective at noon on December 28, 1917. The directive was ordered by President Woodrow Wilson in response to fears of national gridlock. Unfortunately, the government did no better in maintaining field operations in the private sector. During this time, equipment wasn't run down and infrastructure insufficiently maintained to meet the crushing demand. The Wabash survived this ordeal better than most and was returned to private ownership on February 28, 1920, following the passage of the Transportation Act. That decade was generally good. Net opening income reached $2.2 million by 1925 and witnessed a series of interesting events unfold. Here we see a trio of Wabash locomotives pictured here in well, it doesn't say where, but they all share the Follow the Flag logo. From left to right, we see Wabash Alco FPA 1, no 1053, E8A 1009, and E7A 1001 await their next assignment in May of 1962. Note the difference in the FA, the E7, and the E7 and the E8 in their paint schemes. The E8s, though the E7s, I'm sorry, were painted a unique Wabash all blue with gold stripes, while the E8s were painted in Wabash silver, blue, and white. The Alco PAs also had this treatment. First, it acquired stock of the 292-mile Ann Arbor Railroad in 1925, which maintained a linear route between Detroit and the Lake Michigan Car Ferry Terminal of Frankfort, Michigan. By 1930, it owned more than 99% of Ann Arbor stock. In part of a larger debt by board chairman William Williams and Delaware and Hudson president Leonore Lurie to create the so-called Fifth System, a giant Midwestern carrier to rival trunk lines Baltimore and Ohio, Pennsylvania Railway, and New York. To rival trunk lines Baltimore and Ohio, Pennsylvania Railroad, and New York Central. This wasn't a new concept and actually fell in line with the Interstate Commerce Commission's plan to merge all eastern systems outside of New England into a handful of large mega railroads. The group actually came closest to achieving this was the Van Sworgeden brothers, using the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Nickel Plate Road as the nucleus of their effort involved forming a 9,200-mile railroad, so-called Greater Nickel Plate System. As for William Williams, their plan included Wabash. Hang on, 1 second, please, everybody. That's much better. The Delaware and Hudson, the Ann Arbor Railroad, the Lehigh Valley Railroad, the Pittsburgh and West Virginia Railroad, the Western Maryland, the Buffalo, Rochester, and Pittsburgh to create the 7,000-mile-plus network. Unfortunately, the Fifth System Rail fell through and the ICC refused D&H control of the BRMP. In addition, the PRR, which once oddly endorsed the plan, suddenly turned against it and over time acquired stock control of the Wabash as well as the Lehigh Valley. This takeover led to a bitter court battle which saw the PRR victorious when a deadlocked Supreme Court on March 19, 1934, stated an earlier Third Circuit Court of Appeals decision that Perry's takeover would not lessen competition. Wabash 1003 and E8A has train number 1, the westbound Wabash Cannonball, boarding at Delano, Illinois, October 28, 1962. Another Roger Puda photo. I guess Toledo, Illinois must have been a popular spot to shoot trains at that time. The E8 in this picture is kind of dirty as well, as you can see in the white paint. By the end, the PRR largely stayed out of Wabash affairs, establishing its prominent rise into an important and profitable Midwestern bridge line. It suffered one last financial setback when the Great Depression plunged it back into bankruptcy on December 1st, 1931. In 1928, the company enjoyed a net income of more than $11.9 million. Alas, this melted to a staggering net loss of $7.5 million by the end of 1931. While reorganization would require more than a decade, the railroad slowly rebonded as the economy recovered from an operating income that stood at a low 31,691 million in 1931. Wabash showed a strengthening bottom line over the next few years. It reached 46,133 million in 1937, dipped to just over 40 million a year later, and boosted a network income of just over $1,000 million in the first quarter of 1942. With a bright outlook, it was officially reorganized as the Wabash Railroad Company on January 1st, 1942. World War II years witnessed bluntful business, peaking in 1943 when it enjoyed a network income of $8,758 million. These strong numbers continued in post-war years as this figure had jumped to $10,997 billion by 1948. A few years after the Norfolk and Western merger, a former Wabash E8A arrives in Decatur, Illinois, with train 111, the banner blue, May 7, 1966. The track next over can be seen with Norfolk and Western 508 with train number 1, the Wabash Cannonball. Another Roger Puda photo. The Wabash used its healthy earnings to further infrastructure improvements and sought retirement of the steam locomotive, a process which was completed on July 28, 1855. A few years earlier, it had also taken part in another industrial transformation, the Streamliner, by introducing the City of Kansas City, November 24, 1947. It was a daytime train running between Kansas City, Missouri and St. Louis, Missouri, featuring a new lightweight equipment from American Car and Foundry, ACF, that included a standard baggage car, a baggage mail car, a diner car, a coffee shop coach, 2 standard coaches, and an observation parlor car, powered by Electromotive's new E7 diesels. Another popular daytime service was the Bluebird, launched on February 26, 1950, to work the Chicago to St. Louis market. The train featured a sleek set of built equipment including a combination of baggage, buffet, lounge, 3 dome chair cars, a diner lounge car, and a dome parlor observation car. Ironically, the railroad's most legendary train wasn't even born until February 26, 1950. And thanks to the popularity of a folk classic, the Wabash Cannonball, the railroad introduced a train by the name of the Wabash Cannonball, serving the St. Louis to Detroit route. Wabash FA2 number 820 and other power lay over between assignments at Decatur, Illinois, May 20th, 1964. As Alco Snow states, follow the flag, a Dick Woolen pillow. This is the diesel roster of the Wabash. The Wabash rostered 6 Alco Century 424 diesels, numbers B900 to B906. These interesting locomotives were actually intended to go to the Wabash, but were accidentally delivered to National de Mexico Railroad. When they did arrive on the Wabash, however, they were used as B units as they had kilometer per hour gauges rather than mile per hour gauges. B902 was in a wreck it was in a wreck in October 1964. It was later scrapped. A Fairbanks H660. No, that's a Baldwin. Um, being numbers 10 and 100 and 150, being built in 1939 and 1940 respectively. It is unknown what happened to these units. An Alco S1 numbered 1 built in 1940 was acquired from the Des Moines Union Railroad, being the same number in 1960. Oh, it was acquired by the Des Moines Union Railroad in 1962. They have S1s numbers 1, 1, 1. Oh, numbers 151 through 159. S2s numbers 310 to 321, 325. S4 322 to 340, 324. The Century 425s, they had 6 of these, number 1000 to 1006, became property after delivery of the Norfolk and Western. Alco PAs number 1020, 1021, 1020A, and 1021A, built in 1949. FAs 1 number 1200 to 1204, 1200A to 1204A were built in 1949. FB1 number 12000B, 1204B, built in 1949. FA2s number 800 to 823, built in 1950, acquired from Ann Arbor in 1963. All these were Alco makes. Baldwins, they have VO660 number 200, built in 1941. DS4 460 number 202 and 201, built in 1947. VO1000s number 300 to 303, built in 1942 and 46 respectively. Number 304 is a Baldwin DS44 1000, built in 1949. S12 numbers 305 to 309, built in 1951-53 respectively. Lima Locomotive Works, LS 1000s and 12,000s, numbers 400 and 401 to 411, built 1950, was the Lima Demonstrator, originally 1002, later upgraded to 1200 horsepower. And 147 is another ex-Lima Demonstrator, 1003. All units were later re-engined with Alco prime movers. Lima's brief catalog of diesel locomotives carried no official model name. Electromotive Division, numbers SW1. SW1's number 201 to 111 were built in 1939 and 49 respectively. SW8 number 120 and 132 were built in 50 and 53 respectively. NW2 346 to 349 were built in 1940 and 41 respectively. These were ex-nickel plate. Numbers NW2 numbers 350 to 353 were built in 1946 and 49 respectively. SW7 355 to 362 were built in 1950. SW9 363 374 built in 1951 to 53 respectively. SW1200 375 to 379 were built in 54 and 57 respectively. GP9s number 450 to 483 were built in 1950 to 1953. GP9s 484 to 495 were built in 1954 to 56. GP35s number 540 to 547 were built in 1964, being some of the last locomotives purchased by the Wabash. E7As number 1000 and 1001 were renumbered to 101A and 102, were built in 1949. E8A number 1000, 1003 to 1015 were built in 1949 to 53, respectively. F7As number 1100 to 1108, then 1108A to 1140 to 189A, and 111A to 140 to 189 were built in 1949 to 1953. F7B number 1100B to 1108B were built in 1949 to 1950, respectively. And finally, F9A number 1141A were built in 1949. Fairbanks Morse were H10, H1044, 380 to 383 were built in 1946 to 49. H12 44, number 384 to 386 was built in 1953. Of H2466 Trainmasters, 350 to 354, 352A to 354A were built in 1956 to 1950. Oh, they were both built in 56. General Electric 44 Tonner 51 was built in 1939. U-25B 500 to 511 were built in 1962. U-25B first 512 was built in 1962, was wrecked in 1964. U-25B 512 second was built in 1965, replaced the first 512. U-25B 513 to 514 were built in 1962. They utilized traded-in Alco FA1 trucks. An American Locomotive Builders photo featuring a Wabash Trainmaster number 597 at Schenectady Shops, New York during 1964. Built by Fairbanks Morse, Wabash had its 8 H1266 road switchers sent to Alco and repowered with Alco single 521B prime movers capable of producing 2,350 horsepower. So it did not have their original engines going into the Norfolk and Western years. And here's all their steam locomotives that the Wabash utilized. Here's one of the Wabash Handsome 482 Mountains M1 class, as seen here at Paternal in Brooklyn, Illinois, just across the Missouri River from St. Louis, in May 1st, 1948. Manufactured by Baldwin in 1929, they were intended for freight service between Montpelier, Ohio, and Decatur, Illinois. All were scrapped between 53 and 55. These two were rebuilt from former Havana, Rentoul, and Eastern 440's narrow gauge property leased to the Wabash, St. Louis and Pacific in May of 1880. They were rebuilt in 1888. Ex-St. Louis Railroad. Some units were renumbered from 1868 to 1878, 1884, 1885 to 1887, 1889 to 1890, 1892 to 1894, 1899 to 1901. Ex-William Lake Erie Railway, ex-Western Pacific, rebuilt from 262 G1s. This roster includes only those locomotives which the Wabash only classified after 1897. Not every single unit ever operated is included, such as early predecessor examples and subsidiaries. Thanks to Don Himmelberger's book, Wabash, for help regarding much of the above steam and diesel roster information. Here we see Norfolk, but the Wabash legacy lived on even after the Norfolk Southern years. Wabash, in 2012, the Norfolk Southern released its 20 heritage units, with Norfolk Southern 1070 being the Wabash Heritage Unit, also nicknamed the Wabash Cannonball. Seen here during the ceremony at the North Carolina Transportation Museum of Spencer, North Carolina, a former Southern Railway yard. The Wabash spent its final decade continuing to provide high-quality freight service while while, angling to cut money losing passenger trains wherever and whenever possible. As the industry found itself in increasingly uncertain times, particularly in the East, the Wabash realized its future was in doubt. The 50s proved a watershed as railroads struggled to sustain profitability due to an increased competition, suffocating government regulation, and an inability to shed unprofitable branches and secondary lines. Talks of merger sprang up here, and although it was the Pennsylvania and New York Central which made national headlines, just announcing their intention to merge in 1957. As part of this endeavor, PRR had to relinquish its control of Norfolk and Western interests. Then on a merger with the Nickel Plate Road. In addition, all parties agreed to have the Wabash included within the N&W to Nickel Plate Union, made official December 1st, 1960. As part of the deal, Wabash sold its interest with Ann Arbor and officially joined the Norfolk and Western Nickel Plate system at 12:01 a.m. on October 16, 1964. Wabash was a fascinating railroad with a fascinating culture and even more interesting history. It became widely reorganized as a high-speed Midwestern artery, which with a highly diversified traffic base ranging from auto parts to produce, a trait to which it is remembered today. So yeah, that pretty much covers the story of the Wabash Cannonball. If you enjoyed today's video, excuse me. Whoops. If you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to give it a like and don't forget to subscribe. It always helps out the channel and I appreciate it whenever possible so I can keep making great videos for you guys. Anyways, that will probably do it for this video. So, hang on. Like I said, that'll probably do it for this video. And until we meet again somewhere out there in the high iron, this is L&M Productions, out.